you could say perception is unique. Every perception is unique. But it's not personal in the sense that it doesn't belong to an individual consciousness. The one that has the perception or knows the perception is not something that is exclusively identified with a particular body. So when you have a perception, for instance, the perception that we're having now, that perception is known, yes? But whatever it is that knows the perception is not standing apart from the perception, viewing it at a distance. The perception is pervaded by the knowing of it. In fact, it's not even pervaded by the knowing of it, in the same way that an image on a screen is not pervaded by the screen. There isn't one thing called an image and another thing called a screen that somehow pervades the image. Likewise, perception isn't pervaded by the knowing of it or consciousness. Perception is made out of, there's only one substance present there, which is knowing or consciousness or awareness. Now, if we look into the nature of that awareness, out of which each limited perception is made, the awareness itself is not limited. In just the same way that if you explore a screen on which a landscape is appearing, and you go up to the screen and explore what its nature is, you find that green, the green of the grass and the blue of the sky, is not essential to the nature of the screen. In other words, the nature of the screen is not derived from the appearance. So although perception is limited, for instance, now we're seeing the inside of a room, we're not seeing a landscape. In that sense, perception is limited, but the knowing out of which it is made is not limited by the appearance that it assumes. In other words, it is this knowing that assumes the name and the form of this temporary experience, but the knowing remains intimately one with the perception, but at the same time free of it. When the perception goes, you close your eyes, perception vanishes, the knowing out of which it was made just remains this infinite, transparent, empty, luminous knowing. And it then takes the shape of the next perception, which, when viewed from the outside, seems to be limited, but when viewed from the inside is unlimited. Yes, let's say in a relationship that some conflict arises, and at a superficial level the conflict has arisen because you said you'd do something yesterday and you didn't do it, or you said something unkind, or some such reason. You can explore the story like that. Or you can go to the essential element of the conflict, which is the belief that we are separate. So if we explore the story, it might clear up the local issue, but it won't uproot the sense of separation, which is struggling for survival in the relationship, either trying to aggrandize itself through the other, or trying to seek love from the other. So that sense of separation will just pop up the next day in a conflict about something else, and then it will pop up the next day about a conflict about something else. So as long as this separate I is still, in other words, as long as the relationship is still a relationship between two entities who believe that they are separate, then the most efficient thing those two entities can do is to explore their belief in their own sense of separation. To explore the story may temporarily put an end to that particular conflict, but it'll only show up again tomorrow. Now, having explored our true nature and discovered that we are not a separate self, and therefore the other is not a separate other, that paves the way for a completely new kind of relationship. A relationship that is not between two entities who are using the other either to aggrandize themselves or to receive love. And that doesn't necessarily mean that as these two body minds come together, that they're always going to meet in harmony. That there may genuinely be the realization that we are not separate entities, and yet still, particularly in the early stages of a relationship, there may be take some time for these two planets that have come together to find a way of living harmoniously together, because each planet, each body mind has their own particular habits, their own. So these kind of conflicts can still arise in a relationship after the realization of our true nature, but they can be dealt with very quickly and cleanly, and they leave no trace on the relationship. They leave no resentments and hurts and bitterness, and it's sorted out in a very practical way, and then the relationship grows from the experience and moves on. No, it's not necessary. We have to explore the root sense of separation that is the fundamental element in these conflicts that develop between two apparently separate entities. Once that has been seen through, or as it begins to fall away, the relationship ceases to be a relationship between two entities trying to derive love from one another, and that paves the way for the relationship to be a real expression of love and intimacy. But as I say, it doesn't immediately put an end to these differences. There may still be differences, but these differences they're relatively easily sorted out, because they are no longer differences that come from this deeply held belief in separation. They are more to do with just the differences of body minds slowly coming together. For instance, if you travel to a foreign country, you go to India, for instance, your body mind takes some time to adjust to the new environment. That's not a sign of ignorance. It's just that your body mind is used to certain habits. It now finds itself in a very different climate and culture, and it takes some time to adjust. Well, your relationship is like continually going to India, relating with a new climate, a new atmosphere. It takes time to adjust, and there may be some case within that for exploring these habits and these patterns. But what is important is that the root, at the source of these conflicts has been really seen through. Then what's left of these habits are dealt with quite easily and quite quickly, and above all, they don't leave a trace in the relationship. They don't stain or harm the relationship. They're dealt with, and you move on. It's like saying, when you were a child and you found a mirror, and you caught the sun's light in the mirror, and you tilted the mirror and you shine the sun's light in your friend's eye across the other side of the classroom. It's like saying what you've just suggested, the belief that awareness needs the body mind in order to be aware of itself, is like saying the sun needs to reflect itself in a mirror and then to have somebody shine the mirror back towards the sun in order to light it up. You see, awareness knows itself by itself. Imagine empty space. but invest empty space with a quality of being aware. So imagine empty space, but it's aware space. Now, what does that aware space need to do in order to be aware of itself? It doesn't need to do anything. Its nature is to be aware. It's not aware of itself as something. Empty space can't separate itself from itself and turn round and say, oh look, I am empty space. But just by being itself, it knows itself. So awareness is like that. Awareness can't separate itself from itself, turn round and say, oh look, I am awareness. Thought does all that, but awareness doesn't need to do that. Just by being itself, it knows itself, or it is aware of itself. And it is, just say one thing, this is a very crucial point, because even in people that have been on a spiritual path for many years, this deep belief remains that it is the body-mind that is aware, that it is I, this body-mind, that is aware. It's not. It's awareness that is aware. And the very first thing, it's not a thing, but the very first thing awareness knows, before it seems to know something other than itself, it knows itself just by being itself. It doesn't need a mind or a body or a world to know itself. We could say that in order for pure, transparent, empty awareness to know something other than itself, it has to vibrate within itself and take the shape of what we call mind. As the mind, and I mean mind in the broadest sense of the word, thinking, sensing and perceiving, as the mind, awareness can appear as thinking, sensing, perceiving, in the same way that the transparent screen can vibrate within itself and appear as the image. So although the image is made only out of the screen, it appears to be something different from the screen. So it is pure awareness that vibrates within itself and, as it were, takes the shape of thinking, sensing and perceiving. Now, that activity of thinking can then take one of the objects that are perceived and identify awareness with that object. So sensing and perceiving arises, all intimately one with the screen. And then thinking arises and can extract one object, called the body, out of this seamless intimacy of sensing and perceiving and say, awareness is identical to that body. Now, at that moment, sensing and perceiving are no longer totally intimate with awareness. It seems that awareness contracts into the body and becomes a separate mind. And we then have to give another name for everything that is not this separate mind, and that becomes matter. That's how mind and matter, a separate mind, and stuff called matter, are co-created with this belief that awareness is identical to the body. So it's not either mind or matter. Mind and matter are two sides of the same belief. And the belief arises when awareness seems to turn its back on itself, by rising as the mind, identifying itself with an object, and therefore seeming to cease being this infinite, all-pervasive awareness, and instead becoming a separate self inside the body.